The morning sky over New York burned with an unnatural crimson glow as massive shadows fell across the city. Commander Zixthara stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's edge, watching through the viewport as human structures crumbled beneath the weight of their assault. The third planet of this unremarkable star system had fallen faster than expected, much faster than the intelligence reports had predicted. "Status report," Zixthara commanded, his forearms working across the control interface with practiced efficiency. The Kethmori Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the past century, and each victory followed the same predictable pattern. Planetary defenses neutralized within the first hour. "Commander," reported his tactical officer Velinara, "their primitive aircraft posed no significant threat to our interceptor squadrons. Major population centers are under our control. Resistance is ... minimal." Zixthara nodded, though something felt different about this conquest. The humans had surprised him with their initial response, not the panicked chaos he expected, but an almost eerie calm. Their military forces had fought with desperate courage, but their technology was laughably inferior. Projectile weapons against energy shields. Chemical propulsion against gravity manipulation. It should have been a massacre, and it was the first wave of Kethmori. Forces had swept across Earth's major continents like a tide of destruction. Cities that had stood for centuries were reduced to smoldering ruins within hours. The human governments had attempted to coordinate a defense, but their communication networks were the first targets eliminated. Without their primitive electronic systems, human civilization crumbled like sand dot in London. The ancient city burned as Kethmori ground forces marched through empty streets. The humans who remained cowered in underground shelters, praying to their various deities for salvation that would never come. The British military had made a valiant stand at Heathrow, but plasma cannons had turned their steel war machines into molten slag in minutes. Beijing suffered a similar fate. The Chinese People's Liberation Army had attempted to use their numerical advantage, throwing wave after wave of soldiers against the invading force. It was like watching insects attack a bonfire. The Kethmori warriors, each standing 3 meters tall and protected by personal energy shields, cut through human forces with casual efficiency. Their rail rifles could punch through any armor humanity possessed, and their tactical advantages made every engagement a foregone conclusion. Moscow's resistance had been perhaps the most impressive. The Russians had deployed their most advanced weaponry, including nuclear artillery. For a brief moment, Zixthara had thought the humans might actually damage one of his assault craft. But Kethmori shielding technology was designed to withstand stellar radiation. Human nuclear weapons were merely bright lights in the darkness. Tokyo had fallen without a shot being fired. The Japanese government, recognizing the futility of resistance, had surrendered immediately upon seeing the destruction visited upon other major cities. Zixthara respected their pragmatism. Even as he ordered their infrastructure dismantled, the conquest of Earth followed the Kethmori playbook perfectly. Step 1. Establish orbital superiority and eliminate planetary defenses. Step 2. Target population centers and command structures. Step 3. Demonstrate overwhelming force to break enemy morale. Step 4. Accept surrender and begin integration protocols. But as Zixthara observed the tactical displays showing human casualty reports and surrender statistics, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The numbers were too clean, too predictable. In 47 previous conquests, there had always been some surprise, some unexpected resistance or tactical innovation that required adaptation. The Zephyrians had possessed cloaking technology that took weeks to counter. The Modaki had used biological warfare that claimed thousands of Kethmori lives before an antidote was developed. The silicon-based crystallines had literally reshaped their planet's geology to create defensive advantages. But humans? They had fought bravely but conventionally. Their tactics were textbook applications of primitive warfare doctrine. Their weapons were exactly what intelligence reports had predicted. Their casualties mounted at precisely the rate the computers had calculated. "Commander," Velinara's voice carried a note of confusion. "We're receiving some unusual reports from ground forces." "Explain." Several of our occupation units report that human population centers appear emptier than expected. Census data suggested New York alone contained over 8 million inhabitants. But we've only accounted for approximately 2 million in casualty and prisoner reports. Zixthara's primary eyes narrowed. Are they hiding in underground facilities? Some, certainly. But our deep scanners should detect large gatherings of organic life signs. The numbers don't match, Commander. Before Zixthara could respond, his communications officer interrupted. Priority transmission from Ground Marshal Kex Valoom. Put him through. The holographic projection flickered to life, showing the scarred visage of the Empire's most experienced ground commander. Kex Valoom had personally led the final assaults on 17 different worlds. If anyone understood planetary conquest, it was him. Commander Zixthara. Kexvil's voice carried an edge that hadn't been there during the initial assault reports. We need to discuss the human situation. Proceed. These humans are different. My advanced scouts report that large groups of them disappeared from major cities, hours before our main assault began. Not fled, disappeared. Our orbital surveillance showed them there one moment, gone the next. Zixthara felt the first stirring of unease. Primitive teleportation technology? Negative. No energy signatures consistent with matter transportation. They simply left. But here's what concerns me more, the ones who stayed behind to fight. They weren't fighting to win, Commander. They were fighting to buy time. Time for what? That's what we need to find out. I've interrogated dozens of prisoners, and their responses are unsettling. They keep saying the same thing. You have no idea what you've started. Not what you've done, what you've started. As if this is just the beginning of something. The tactical display updated, showing red zones spreading across the planetary surface. These weren't areas of active resistance, those were marked in orange. The red zones were designated as unknown activity detected. What's happening in the red zones? Zixthara asked. Velanara manipulated the display, zooming in on what had once been the North American continent. Seismic activity, Commander? But not natural earthquakes. The pattern suggests construction, large-scale excavation and construction, happening simultaneously across dozens of sites. Construction of what? Unknown. The work is happening too deep for our standard scanners to penetrate effectively, and when we send reconnaissance drones to investigate yes? They don't come back. Zixthara studied the display more carefully. The red zones formed an irregular but clearly deliberate pattern across Earth's surface. There were clusters in the Rocky Mountains, the Appalachians, the Andes, the Himalayas, the Urals, and dozens of other mountain ranges, but also in less obvious locations beneath the Sahara Desert, under the ice sheets of Antarctica, in the deepest parts of the world's oceans. How long has this construction been ongoing? Based on seismic analysis, approximately 72 hours. It began. Velanara paused, checking her calculations. It began 6 hours before our first ships entered this system? The silence on the bridge was profound. Every officer understood the implications. The humans had known they were coming. Somehow, impossibly, they had detected the Kethmori fleet while it was still light years away and had immediately begun preparations. Commander, the communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the planetary surface. Origin point is everywhere. The signal is being broadcast simultaneously from thousands of locations worldwide. Put it through. The view screen shimmered and then a human face appeared. It was an elderly man with gray hair and calm eyes, wearing what appeared to be a simple business suit. He sat behind a wooden desk in what looked like an underground bunker, though the background was clearly artificial, a projection designed to hide his true location. Greetings, the human said in accented galactic standard. His pronunciation surprisingly good for a species that had supposedly never encountered off-world intelligence. I am Dr. Marcus Chun, and I speak for the human species. We have been expecting you. Zixthara leaned forward in his command chair. You surrender? The human smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Zixthara's secondary heart skip a beat. It wasn't the smile of a defeated enemy. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret. Surrender? Dr. Chun repeated. Oh, Commander, may I call you Commander? We haven't even started fighting yet. Your military forces are destroyed. Your cities burn? Your governments have fallen. What you've seen is the full might of the Kethmori Empire. What we've seen, Dr. Chun corrected gently, is your opening move? A very impressive opening move, I'll grant you. 43 million human lives lost in the first day. Quite efficient. But you made one small mistake. Enlighten me. You assumed we were like the other species you've conquered. You assumed we would fight conventionally, desperately trying to protect what we've built above ground, clinging to our sea. The first sign that something had gone catastrophically wrong came at 0347 hours, 3 days after the initial conquest. Ground Marshal Kex Valoom was reviewing casualty reports in his command bunker outside the ruins of Washington, D.C. when every communication array in the sector went dark simultaneously. Not destroyed, that would have triggered alarms and shown energy signatures. They simply stopped working, as if someone had thrown a switch across half the continent. Status report. Kex Valoom barked, but his communications officer could only shake his head helplessly. The Kethmori had conquered 47 worlds, and their technology had never simply failed before. That's when the attacks began. In the mountains of Colorado. A Kethmori garrison of 300 warriors simply vanished. One moment they were conducting routine patrols of their assigned sector. The next moment their life signs disappeared from all monitoring systems. Search teams found the garrison post intact, weapons still in their racks, meals half finished in the cafeteria. But not a single Kethmori remained. The search teams found the bodies 2 days later, arranged in a perfect spiral pattern in a meadow 15 kilometers from their base. They had been killed by human weapons primitive, chemical projectiles that shouldn't have been able to penetrate Kethmori armor. But somehow, every shot had found the exact weak points in their personal shielding systems. Weak points that were classified information, known only to Kethmori military engineers. Similar reports flooded in from across the planet. In the Australian outback, an entire mechanized division was found buried beneath an avalanche that geological sensors insisted was impossible. The local rock formations couldn't support that type of mass failure. In the Amazon rainforest, Kethmori aircraft began falling from the sky. Their gravity manipulation systems somehow corrupted by what appeared to be primitive computer viruses that shouldn't have been able to interface with Kethmori technology at all. But the most disturbing reports came from urban areas. In the ruins of London, patrols reported seeing humans in the shadows, not hiding, but watching. When pursued, these humans would disappear into infrastructure that the Kethmori had supposedly destroyed, moving through tunnel systems that didn't appear on any human city planning documents. When the Kethmori tried to follow, they found themselves in mazes of interconnected passages that seemed to extend far deeper than should have been possible. Commander Zixthara studied the reports from his flagship, trying to make sense of the chaos erupting across the planet below. The humans were fighting back, but not in any way the Kethmori could understand or counter. Commander, Velinara announced, her voice tight with barely controlled fear. We're receiving a transmission from Ground Marshal Kex Valoom. Priority Alpha. The holographic projection showed Kex Valoom in what appeared to be a moving vehicle, the image shaking with each bump and impact. Behind him, energy weapons fired in rapid succession, lighting up the interior with strobing flashes. Commander, Kex Valoom shouted over the noise of battle. We're under attack by forces unknown. They're using our own technology against us, but modified in ways that should be impossible. Explain, Zixthara demanded. They've somehow acquired our weapons and integrated them with their own technology. But that's not the worst part. They're using tactics we've never encountered. They don't fight to hold territory or defend positions. They fight to cause maximum psychological damage. An explosion rocked Kex Val's vehicle, and the transmission flickered. When it stabilized, his face was grim. "They leave messages, Commander. Written in our language, in our blood. Messages that show they understand our culture, our fears, our military doctrine better than they should. This morning I found a tactical analysis of our entire invasion plan carved into the walls of our command bunker. It was written in perfect Kethmori script and signed. From your students in the art of war." The transmission cut out as another explosion shook the screen. When it came back, Kexvalum was speaking to someone off camera. "How many wounded?" "What do you mean they won't accept medical treatment?" "They're choosing to die rather than—" The feed went dead. Zixthara stared at the blank screen, his mind racing. In 70 years of military service, he had never encountered an enemy that studied their opponents during active combat, learning and adapting in real time. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were evolving their tactics with each engagement. "Sir," the tactical officer announced, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planetary surface. The humans appear to be activating some kind of planetary defense grid." The main display shifted to show Earth's surface. Across every continent, structures were rising from underground installations. But these weren't the crude bunkers or missile silos that Kethmori intelligence had expected. They were sophisticated installations that bore unsettling resemblances to Kethmori technology, but with modifications that hurt to look at directly. "Analysis," Zixthara commanded. "Unknown, sir. The energy signatures don't match any known technology. It's as if they've taken our power generation systems and somehow made them more efficient. That should be physically impossible given their understanding of quantum mechanics." One of the installations fired a beam of energy into space. It wasn't aimed at any Kethmori vessel, but at a point in empty space where there was nothing to hit. The beam struck its target, and suddenly space itself seemed to ripple and distort. "What just happened?" Zixthara asked. I don't know, sir. But our navigation computers are reporting that local spacetime has been altered. The gravitational fields in this system are shifting." Before anyone could respond, Dr. Chun's face appeared on the main screen again. This time he wasn't sitting behind a desk. He stood in what appeared to be a vast underground chamber filled with impossible machinery devices that looked like Kethmori technology that had been improved by minds that understood it better than its original creators. "Good evening, Commander Zixthara," Dr. Chun said pleasantly. "I trust you've noticed that your invasion isn't proceeding quite as planned. What have you done?" Zixthara snarled. "We've learned," Dr. Chun replied simply. "You see, you made a critical error in your intelligence gathering. You assumed that human technology represented the sum total of human knowledge. But humans have been studying the universe for thousands of years. We've had theories about advanced physics that we simply lacked the technology to test. Until you arrived." The display behind Dr. Chun showed technical diagrams that made Zixthara's engineer recoil in horror. They were detailed schematics of Kethmori technology, but not just copied, improved, refined, enhanced in ways that even the Kethmori hadn't considered. "Every piece of equipment you brought to our world, every weapon you fired, every system you activated, we recorded it all. We studied it. And in 72 hours, some of our brightest minds accomplished what took your civilization centuries to develop. The advantage of starting with a complete example to reverse engineer. Impossible. Our technology is protected by quantum encryption that cannot be broken." Dr. Chun smiled that same unsettling smile from their first communication. "Commander, did your intelligence reports mention that humans have been working on quantum computing for decades? Or that we've had theoretical frameworks for dimensional manipulation since the early 20th century? We just needed to see how it was actually done." The energy beams from Earth's surface intensified, and suddenly the Kethmori fleet found itself trapped. The gravitational fields that powered their faster-than-light drives were being artificially maintained by the planetary installations. They were caught in a cage made of their own technology. "But the real lesson we learned," Dr. Chun continued, "isn't about technology at all. It's about psychology. You see, we've been studying your behavior since you arrived. The way you fight, the way you think, the way you conquer. And we've realized something important. You're not used to fighting enemies who fight back intelligently. On the tactical display, Zixtara could see human forces emerging from underground installations across the globe. But these weren't the primitive soldiers they had fought 3 days ago. These humans wore powered armor that looked remarkably similar to Kethmori battlesuits, carried weapons that were clearly based on Kethmori designs, and moved with the coordination of a military force that had been training for years rather than days. The species you've conquered before they fought to protect their homes, their families, their way of life. They fought defensively, desperately, trying to preserve what they had built. But humans? Dr. Chen's smile turned predatory. Humans fight to win. And we're very, very good at learning how to win. The first human counterattack struck a Kethmori orbital platform with devastating precision. The weapons used were clearly of human design, but they incorporated Kethmori power generation and targeting systems. The platform's shields, designed to repel energy attacks of known frequencies, were completely ineffective against weapons that combined both technologies in ways their designers had never anticipated. You wanted to conquer humanity, Dr. Chen said as explosions began to light up the space around Earth. Congratulations. You've succeeded. But what you've actually conquered is the old humanity, the peaceful, naive species that believed the universe was essentially friendly. The humanity that fought with primitive. Commander Zixtara had 36 hours to prevent the annihilation of the greatest fleet in Kethmori history. He spent the first 6 hours refusing to believe it was possible. He spent the next 12 hours watching human forces systematically dismantle his military assets with casual efficiency. By hour 18, he was frantically transmitting surrender offers that went unanswered. The humans weren't interested in surrender. Fleet status report, Zixtara commanded, though he dreaded the answer. 17 capital ships destroyed, 31 heavily damaged and combat ineffective, Velinara reported, her voice hollow with shock. Casualties at 43% and climbing. The humans are using our own logistics networks to coordinate attacks on our supply lines. They've somehow infiltrated our command protocols and are issuing contradictory orders to our automated systems. Zixtara studied the tactical display with growing horror. The human attacks weren't random or desperate. They were surgical, precise, calculated to cause maximum damage while preserving human resources. Every strike targeted critical systems that would cripple multiple Kethmori vessels simultaneously. Every assault was perfectly timed to exploit momentary vulnerabilities in their defensive formations. How are they coordinating these attacks? He asked. Our intelligence indicated that human communication technology was primitive at best. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're intercepting human transmissions across all frequencies. They're not using radio or quantum entanglement like we expected. They've somehow created a communication network that operates through the same dimensional space as our faster-than-light drives. They're literally using our own technology to coordinate attacks against us. The view screen flickered to life, showing the familiar face of Dr. Chun, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him stood dozens of humans in advanced combat armor, their faces hidden behind helmets that incorporated Kethmori sensor technology. The message was clear: humanity had not just adapted to alien technology, they had mastered it. Commander Zixtara, Dr. Chun began, his voice carrying a tone of polite regret that somehow made his words more terrifying than any angry threats could have been. I'm afraid your 36-hour deadline has expired. Since you chose not to withdraw, we'll now demonstrate why that was an unfortunate decision. We tried to surrender, Zixtara protested. We sent multiple diplomatic transmissions. Yes, you did, Dr. Chun acknowledged. But you seem to have misunderstood the situation. We're not interested in your surrender, Commander. Surrender implies that we view you as a legitimate military force deserving of consideration under the laws of war. But you see, the Kethmori Empire has spent the last century conquering 47 peaceful civilizations. You've enslaved billions of sentient beings. You've committed genocide on an industrial scale. The humans behind Dr. Chun shifted slightly, as Ixthara could see weapons that clearly incorporated Kethmori plasma technology, but modified in ways that made them far more efficient than the originals. So no, we're not accepting your surrender. Instead, we're going to demonstrate to the galaxy exactly what happens when someone makes the mistake of attacking humanity. Consider it a public education program. The transmission ended, and immediately every remaining Kethmori ship came under coordinated assault. But these weren't the hit-and-run attacks of the previous day. These were overwhelming force projections that spoke to manufacturing capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. Human ships emerged from behind Earth's moon in formations that numbered in the thousands. Each vessel incorporated the best of both human and Kethmori technology, but with innovations that neither species had achieved independently. They moved with precision that suggested not just advanced AI coordination, but an intuitive understanding of three-dimensional combat that the Kethmori had never encountered. "Sir," the tactical officer called out, panic clear in his voice. "The human fleet outnumbers us 3-1, and their individual vessels are showing power signatures comparable to our capital ships." "How is that possible?" "They've had less than a week." "I don't know, sir, but they're not just using our technology, they've improved it. Their power generation is 30% more efficient than ours. Their weapons are operating at frequencies we can't shield against. And their ship designs somehow incorporate materials that our sensors can't identify." The first wave of human attacks struck with devastating effectiveness. Kethmori vessels that had been designed to withstand centuries of warfare were torn apart by weapons that exploited fundamental flaws in their defensive systems, flaws that the Kethmori themselves hadn't known existed. But it wasn't just the superior technology that horrified Zixthara. It was the tactics. The humans fought with a systematic brutality that went beyond mere military efficiency. They targeted life support systems rather than weapon arrays, ensuring that Kethmori crews would die slowly rather than quickly. They jammed escape pod launch systems while leaving communications active, forcing the Kethmori to listen to their own people's final transmissions. Ground. Marshal Kexvil's voice crackled through the communication system one last time. "Commander, they're not just defeating us, they're studying us. Every engagement, they're testing different approaches, different weapons, different psychological pressures. It's like we're specimens in some kind of military research project." The transmission was interrupted by human voices speaking in perfect Kethmori. "Ground Marshal Kexvilum, this is Colonel Sarah Martinez of the Human Expeditionary Force. You are ordered to surrender your remaining troops for processing. Compliance will result in quick execution. Resistance will result in vivisection while conscious, so that we can better understand Kethmori physiology for future conflicts." The cold professionalism in the human's voice was more terrifying than any battle cry. These weren't warriors driven by rage or desperation. They were soldiers conducting a systematic extermination with the same clinical precision they might use to conduct a scientific experiment. "My God," Velinara whispered. "Monitoring communications intercepts from across the battlefield. They're documenting everything. Every weapon they test, every tactic they employ, every psychological response they observe, it's all being recorded and analyzed. They're not just fighting this battle, they're preparing for the next war." Dr. Chian's face appeared on screen again, but this time he was clearly aboard one of the human warships. Behind him, Zixthara could see displays showing detailed information about every Kethmori vessel in the fleet, technical specifications, crew manifests, tactical histories, even personal psychological profiles of commanding officers. "You're probably wondering how we accomplished so much in such a short time," Dr. Chun said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather rather than the systematic destruction of an interstellar fleet. "The answer is simple: motivation and methodology. You gave us the motivation when you murdered 43 million of our people. And you gave us the methodology when you demonstrated every aspect of your technology during your invasion." The display behind him shifted to show manufacturing facilities that had clearly been built in the past week. Massive installations that were producing weapons, ships, and equipment at a rate that should have required decades of development. You see, humans have a particular approach to problem solving that you may not have encountered in your previous conquests. When faced with a superior force, we don't just adapt, we industrialize the solution. Within hours of your invasion, every human nation redirected their entire manufacturing capacity toward reverse engineering your technology. Every university, every research laboratory, every industrial complex was converted to military production. The images showed human workers, millions of them laboring around the clock in facilities that looked more like hives of activity than traditional factories. But what struck Zixtara as most unsettling was their expression of calm, focused determination. These weren't people driven by panic or desperation. They were people who had accepted that their old way of life was over and had committed themselves completely to building something new. "We had advantages you didn't account for," Dr. Chun continued. "First, we've been preparing for interstellar contact for decades. Science fiction, military planning, theoretical physics, we've been imagining this scenario and planning responses for generations. Second, we have a global communication network that allowed instant coordination across our entire species. Within 6 hours of your arrival, every human government, every military force, every scientific institution was working toward the same goal. More human ships appeared on the tactical display, these ones emerging from locations throughout the solar system. They had been building installations not just on Earth, but on the Moon, on Mars, in the asteroid belt, even in the outer system. The scale of their preparation was beyond anything the Kethmori had imagined possible. But the most important advantage, Dr. Chun said, his smile returning with its terrifying implications, is that humans understand something about warfare that you don't. You fight to conquer. We fight to eliminate threats. And you, Commander, represent a threat not just to humanity, but to every free species in the galaxy. The final assault began with a coordinated strike that destroyed every remaining Kethum.